Wendy gives her a comforting pat and agrees with our hero's words as well. Nana's worried father moves closer, urging her to squeeze his hand if the pain gets too much for her to bear. The others join in, deciding to lighten the mood with some coin magic tricks and storytelling. Their lively atmosphere helps lift Nana's worries. Anna then also steps forward, reminding Nana that everyone is by her side, gently kissing her forehead like a caring sister. As midnight approaches, everyone remains seated around her bed, patiently waiting for her to hit maturity. Lightning, true to her energetic self, only seen not bored. On the other hand, the prince looks like he's on the verge of fainting, yawning uncontrollably. Just watching Lightning's energetic behavior is enough to tire him out. He turns to Nightingale and asks if there have been any magical fluctuations in Nana's body. Nightingale shakes her head, mentioning it's been a long wait and she hasn't noticed anything unusual. The prince gives himself a slap on the face to stay awake, already planning to build a clock tower once the months of demons are over, because he finds waiting aimlessly too tedious. Suddenly, Nightingale hears a rooster crowing. The prince pulls aside the curtain and is momentarily blinded by the morning light. Anna wakes up too, startled by the sudden brightness. It's clear the next day has officially arrived, and everyone is pleasantly surprised as Nana wakes up at daybreak. Lightning bursts with happiness, and her father breaks down in tears. Everyone is incredibly relieved that Nana has successfully passed through her maturity ordeal without any issues. After some time, the prince leans over to Nightingale and asks if she's absolutely sure today is Nana's maturity day. Nightingale nods, mentioning the change was subtle but definite. She agrees with our hero's theory about witches, how daily magic practice can boost their powers and ease their hardships. If all witches get good training daily, they could make it to adulthood without issues. Wendy joins in, saying since the prince is the only one welcoming witches, they could turn Border Town into a sanctuary. She pledges full support, and the prince lights up, saying he's been thinking about this for ages. But since openly inviting witches could get him cancelled by the kingdom, he plans to spread rumors about a sanctuary to let the witches come by themselves. However, if he becomes the king, there will be no one stopping him to invite witches. Wendy drops to her knees, promising to help him become king. She swears her loyalty and says her life belongs to him now. The next day, our hero's sail ship finally makes it ashore. Two soldiers take a close look and start pointing out all sorts of technical flaws that make this boat unlike any they've seen before. Once they finish their inspection, they decide to head back to cannon training. Meanwhile, some daydreaming soldiers, trailing behind Vice Captain Vanner, start talking loudly about wanting to be as formidable as Hunter Iron Axe. But then one of them gets serious, pointing out they've been training forever without firing a single shot, and wonders when the prince will actually let them loose in a real battle. Another soldier mentions how those in the Flintlock team have already been at it for days, practicing battle tactics on the walls. That's when Vanner starts to wonder if our hero really plans to use the cannon team against demonic beasts. But, considering how heavy and bulky the cannon is, it's not exactly ideal for transporting up onto the walls. Finally, it clicks for Vanner that their master's strategy involves using the cannon on the sailing boat, not just against beasts, but against a strong army. At the west shore of Redwater River in Border Town, we find the cannon team undergoing training under the command of Hunter Iron Axe. They've been tasked with aiming the cannon in a specific direction. The chief knight remarks on how hardworking the cannon team looks, and our hero agrees, noting that both teams are pushing themselves to earn 5 more silver coins than the others, which fuels their determination to succeed. The prince plans to move operations to Littletown once the soldiers are well trained on the ground. Curiously, the knight asks if our hero means the concrete ship they built, and our hero nods, saying that's what he's calling it. He points out that the workers managed to wrap up everything in these few days when the snow was light. They not only slapped on some anti-rust treatment, but also threw together a shed for storing cannonballs. And hey, Wendy's got herself a platform now to play around with her wind powers to stir the boat. Chief Knight finally gets why our hero was so bent on training Wendy to handle her magic. Then Prince Roland drops a bomb on the poor knight by making him the commander of the boat. The knight freaks out, saying he's never sailed a ship in his life. Our hero shrugs it off, saying it's no big deal because the witches will be the ones running the show anyway. When the soldiers finally let loose a cannonball, it goes boom. And our hero is feeling pretty smug as he is about to kick off this new leg of his journey aboard his boat. With the glass bottle shattered by the impact, Lightning finally inaugurates their boat adventure, all set to sail as Littletown's navigator. Meanwhile, Taigu Pine, the overprotective dad, takes charge of communications. On the other hand, the knight reluctantly roped into the role of captain doesn't look too thrilled. Lightning gives the knight a reassuring pat on the shoulder, assuring him that navigating suits her perfectly since she's a pro at sea adventures. She mentions her dad, known as Thunderbolt, also has a knack for the sea. Exploring the ship, Lightning is totally blown away by the bizarre materials it's made of, unlike anything she's ever seen. The chief knight is pleased that the weather is surprisingly good today, a choice made by our hero for testing Littletown. Once the boat is on the water, everything seems to be going smoothly, with a man named Brian assigned as helmsman. Lightning then tells Brian to turn the rudder fully to the right, and the knight echoes the same command. The tomboy gets curious and asks why the chief knight is repeating her, to which he explains he's following orders from the prince. Meanwhile, Brian is clueless about what he's supposed to do, so Lightning, after facepalming, decides to take charge herself. She goes all out and spins the rudder sharply to the left, leaving the two behind totally terrified. After her little adventure, Lightning marvels at how our hero has paid attention to details that even someone with years of sea experience like herself might miss. Lightning then tells Wendy to crank up the wind, since she has been assigned a role as movement power support. Before she got this title, our hero had pushed Wendy to master her magic, which she hadn't really bothered with before getting to Border Town. After some serious effort, her early attempts were only enough to blow dry some pieces of meat, but she matured slowly. And now, armed with those lessons, Wendy channels her magic and gives the boat a solid shove, sending it sailing above the water effortlessly. Lightning and the knight are pumped to see the boat moving, while this father gets all deep philosopher, pointing out how our hero turned rocks into boats and made them float. At this point, he's starting to believe there's nothing our hero can't pull off in this world. As the boat continues to sail smoothly, the man gives props to Brian for becoming a sailor in less than half an hour. Brian sheepishly credits Lightning because she was the one who was guiding him through everything properly. Meanwhile, on the pedestal, Wendy starts feeling drained and struggles to keep up with pushing the boat, as if running out of magical power. But she takes it as a challenge, pushing her limits with a goal to last until the ship reaches shore. Or so she thought. Wendy starts losing consciousness, and Lightning immediately directs everyone to steer the boat towards shore because Wendy has fallen ill. Once the tomboy gets her down, they find Wendy's entire body covered in icy sweat, potentially freezing her to death. They chide her for not informing them about her condition earlier, but it seems their streak of fortune has just taken a turn, as their boat also crashes into some rocks which causes damage. The captain bellows orders, directing Lady Lightning to escort Lady Wendy back to the castle while commanding the others to stay and gather the sails. As Lightning immediately departs with Wendy, the captain of the damaged ship is visibly disheartened. He reflects that while their test of Littletown was not a failure, it hasn't quite been a success either. At least they've identified two critical issues to address: keeping Lady Wendy warm on the pedestal and making the boat shockproof. Meanwhile, back in town, a carriage travels down a desolate road. The driver of this carriage is a one-legged man, and inside the carriage a priest can be seen beating the shit out of this little girl. And this girl is apparently not alone in this carriage. The carriage driver couldn't help but feel sorry for the girls, even though the man inside the carriage seemed to be their only lifeline. Without him, these girls would have likely frozen on the streets. When the man steps out of the carriage, the driver asks if they are all orphans from Wolfheart Kingdom. The priest nods, explaining that churches in the kingdom take in children when food and clothing are scarce. And since church ends up taking tenfold kids nowadays, the priest is glad that they have a driver someone like him to rely on. Grateful for the well-paying job, the driver appreciates earning 20 silvers to transport these orphans. And since he does not have one of his legs, driving the carriage just suits him perfectly. Little does the driver know, these girls aren't ordinary orphans, they are witches. That's why the priest pays him so generously. But the priest doesn't disclose this detail, just urging the driver to keep going without questions and promising payment upon arrival. Once they stop at a hotel to grab some food, the priest tells a woman that he's brought some tender kids for her to take care of. While that awful man parades those girls around like merchandise, the carriage driver can't bear to watch his client exploit them for a quick buck. He closes the curtains, unable to stomach the sight of their humiliation. The scene shifts to Archbishop Maine descending into a vast underground chamber once again. He marvels at the sight, acknowledging that no matter how many times he visits, the grandeur of the dome never fails to take his breath away. The Archbishop asserts that this dome, which he calls a natural creation, is surely the work of the Lord. The Archbishop explains that while the Hermes Church above ground symbolizes steadfastness, the heavily guarded depths of the Hermes dungeon might be the true heart of the church. Once he steps into that mysterious facility, a knight guides the priest deeper into its depths. As they stroll along, we learn these knights are the church's most steadfast hounds, rewarded with homes in these tunnels for their loyalty. Any disciplinary actions are dealt with severely, often resulting in lifelong confinement within the very dungeons they guard. Other tunnels house libraries filled with church literature, historical documents, and notably, the prison where those unlucky criminals rot away for good. Through another door they go, entering the prison where desperate voices beg for freedom, willing to trade their lives just to escape. The priest stops before a particular cell, secured with a large lock. He instructs the knight to wait outside and, once alone, he urges the prisoner inside to eat properly. The priest reminds him that his meals are among the best, though alcohol is understandably excluded. Well, the man in the prison is apparently the King Wimbledon, and he questions if the priest would even have anything to eat in a place like this, while lamenting 6 months of isolation without any news of his son and daughter. The priest appears reluctant to disclose anything, but finally shares the grim news under the king's pressure. Gerald Wimbledon, the king's first son, was executed on Timothy's orders for regicide. The third prince, Garcia, has declared herself Queen of Clearwater, setting the stage for an inevitable clash with Timothy. As for our hero and the fifth princess, they are alive, but there are no significant updates to report. The old man is completely shocked by the news about his first son. He can't hide his sadness as he asks the priest why he waited so long to throw him in jail. King Wimbledon then reveals that the priest used a witch to create a body double of him to get rid of his first son. He acknowledges the church's growing influence across the kingdom, but demands to know why the priest is causing his beloved children to fight each other through royal decrees. He makes it clear that he would never have allowed such strife among his kids. The priest responds by saying that his children are now adults making their own decisions. He points out that his daughter, Garcia Wimbledon, took over Clearwater Port 5 years ago and wouldn't sit back while her brothers fought for the throne. Furthermore, he emphasizes that the church couldn't afford to waste time and had to remove the King Wimbledon to firmly establish their control over the kingdom. The priest declares that the continent will no longer be divided among the 4 great countries which are Dawn, Wolfheart, Everwinter, and Greycastle. Instead, it will unite as one land under the church's rule and governance. The old man, looking defeated as hell, drops to his knees. Blood's dribbling from his mouth, but he still manages to spit out that he'll be waiting for the priest in hell. The priest, not giving a damn, brushes off the whole hell thing, saying their moves are all part of the church's grand plan. The king kicks the bucket right there, probably poisoned. But who knows? The priest sees this as their golden ticket to power, and he is preparing to take down the real enemy they have ahead of them. I guess he is talking about the demons, the true enemy they have yet to repel for the greater good of humanity.